Welcome to the Skyward Data podcast. My name is Mark Potts and I'll be your host. On today's podcast, we have Frank DeGilio from IBM, who has spent over 38 years developing and working with the mainframe. Frank's current role is CTO of declunkification at IBM. On today's call, Frank's going to talk about declunkification and his role and how IBM is modernizing the mainframe and using modern languages to develop sysprod capabilities to simplify the maintenance and support of our modern mainframes.
I have a podcast. And the way I describe it to people is, yeah, it's run by these two yutzes, but everybody who's on that show, I mean, they're all the best of the best in the mainframe environment. So, you know, you talk to people who are deep in the weeds on some of this stuff. And for me, at least, I have learned from every episode, almost every episode that we've had, there's so much to know that if you find somebody who says they're a mainframe expert, they're probably not, right?
Right.
So yeah, I'm amazed at what people can do. The breadth of the mainframe environment is so wide that I find experts every time I turn around, not in the whole thing, but in very special areas. Yeah. And if you had on your podcast a lot of the people that were on mine, I think you'd pull out stuff that we never had a chance to connect with. Yeah. I mean, even if we had the exact same people on all the time, both podcasts would have valuable and different information.
Yeah, no, 100%, right? And I never stop learning when it comes to the mainframe. I think that's what's intriguing, right? I mean, 20 years into my career, and I don't know, hopefully I win the lottery and I'll have to work 25 more years. But let's just say on average, I got to work another 20, 25 years. I mean, there's a lot for me to still learn, right? And that's exciting. And I feel like the mainframe, believe it or not, I mean, it's going to be around, right? And those who think it's going to be gone overnight is not right. I don't believe it. Right.
Well, it's funny. I've been doing working with businesses for 30 years. Yeah. And for 30 years, I've been dealing with a large number of businesses saying, okay, we have a get off the mainframe strategy. Now, if you have a get off the mainframe strategy that's taken you 30 years, you've got a problem, right? Yeah. Yeah. People say they want to get off the mainframe like I say I want to win the lottery, right? And I don't even play, right? Yeah. So it's just comical that a CIO comes into a business and says, hey, my strategy is to get rid of the mainframe, and we're going to put all this stuff in the cloud or whatever. And what happens is they invest money. I worked with a customer that invested $300 million to get off the mainframe and couldn't. Yeah. Imagine you're responsible for a $300 million strategy that failed.
Yeah.
Right? It doesn't make sense.
Yeah, it's the fastest way out of a job sometimes, right? To go pound your fist and say we're getting off the mainframe, right? And maybe if some folks are okay with that, but yeah, it's not a long lifespan, right? In that role, if that's your objective, right?
Well, I understand how you can get there. I understand how people make that mistake. It's just this is crazy.
Yeah, absolutely. You mentioned 30 years working with clients, right? So I know you've been at IBM for 38 years. You've got a role. It sounds like it's a fairly recent role, the CTO of declunkification of the mainframe, right? Which is very intriguing, right? So maybe take a few minutes and tell us a little bit more about your background, and as well as get into that declunkification. I got to pause and make sure I get that right. But
you do it very well, actually. Let me tell you. It's really funny for me because with the title of declunkification, I'm a worldwide resource, right? So when you go to Japan, everybody looks to the translator to see how they're going to translate declunkification. Pretty funny.
Yeah.
But so I came to IBM 38 years ago after some time on Wall Street because they were actually starting to do a language, an AI language that they were going to be running on the mainframe. And I thought, well, this is great. This will be fun. I can get in the ground floor of something because I've always been interested on being on the leading edge of stuff. I like that part of our industry is there's always a leading edge. There's always something new to do. And I quite frankly get bored doing the same thing over and over again. So it was a really interesting thing for me to start. Now that at the time was a prologue on MVS, which turned out to be a product that people were, I guess, not quite ready for.
Yeah.
So it didn't go anywhere. But from that on, the projects I would do inside the company were very much connecting the mainframe to, at the time, like microcomputers or mini computers. And so we did a lot of stuff with different technologies. And I was always kind of connected to that. But I was doing primarily coding and because that's what we did back then. If you were in the business, you were doing coding. What happened though, one day I was in this meeting and we were taking one of those Myers-Briggs tests. And I realized that everybody was at one end of the Myers-Briggs test and I was at the complete other end. I do not belong in development. So I started working, like you said, around 30 years ago with customers. I got a role at IBM that basically allowed me to help them understand how they could use the latest technology on, at the time it was MVS. In fact, it was Open Edition back then. So the neat thing is, for 30 years, I've been doing something new every year with businesses and helping them figure out how they can use that technology. So, if you think about it, this predates when the web became important and valuable. So I started helping people start to use the mainframe in web implementations, and we spent a lot of time showing them how they could take that traditional stuff and connect it to web. Every time we've done something new, I've been out there with clients working at, okay, how do we connect the mainframe to these services, to this internal stuff? How do you build an end-to-end architecture that connected your latest kick stuff with some of the traditional client server stuff? When cloud came along, I was working with businesses to see how they could take their traditional ZOS, IMS, DB2, kicks, and create services from them that can be consumed by other businesses, right? Other technologies. So it really has been a 30-year trip of always taking that latest technology and showing it how it's part of a whole enterprise solution. I think the thing that I've seen often is mainframe people think everything should be on the mainframe. Distributed people think everything should be distributed. Cloud people think that there's only the cloud, right? And the way things will have to work is more nuanced than that. Real solutions are going to tie all this stuff together, right? Which is why my latest job, the declunkification, I refuse to say modernization because that implies that the mainframe hasn't been modern. But it has. It's always been doing modern stuff. It's the same modern strategy every year. Hey, what's new? What's latest? How do I take advantage of it? And since I've been working on it, it's always been focused on how do we make this more open? how do we be better connected to the rest of the world? Now, that doesn't mean everybody's done that, but the platform itself has been like that.
Yeah.
But what I've found is most of the businesses that I've been dealing with the last 5 or 6 years, they're like, we can't use this stuff. It's too old. Well, yeah, it's because you're using old ways of doing stuff. Yeah. Let's use the new stuff, right? And see what you can do.
No, and that's great, right? And I start thinking about, how many times I've had conversations with people about the mainframe, and they say, oh yeah, I mean, that's 50, 60 years old, or even my peers and my friends that might not be in the tech space, or they know a lot about cloud, and I bring up, I work for a mainframe software company, a startup, and they're like, what's the mainframe, right? And I always tell them, like, it's the mainframe is what powers our global economy, right? And everything. And you start thinking about airlines, the whole ticketing process, reservation, FAA, right? All of it is running on a mainframe. Most governments run, their revenue services on the mainframe, and many others, so Social Security and other things, right? So, as we think about that, and we want to share with folks maybe that might not know as much of the mainframe and are going to watch this podcast, what are your thoughts? Is there an interesting fact out there, or something that reminds you of how interesting or how powerful and how prevalent or important the mainframe is in our world today?
Yeah, I mean, a big thing that when people say, well, I like the cloud, I like doing business on the cloud, I remind them, you realize that every credit card process you do, there's a mainframe doing that. Yeah, it's in the cloud, but the actual processing, that's a mainframe, right? If you use not FedEx, the other one, UPS. If you use UPS and you want to track a package, you're using the mainframe, right? All of the things that you think you're doing through the cloud, a lot of them are backed by mainframe activities, because they are the basic building block of most of the large businesses today. Your banks, you mentioned airlines, hotels, all of them use mainframe, not just for the transactions, but for the reservations. It's just so interwoven. I remember somebody who I trust said, if Amazon were to be down tomorrow, there are a bunch of businesses that would just disappear.
Yeah.
If the mainframes disappeared for a day, Western civilization as you know it would disappear.
Yeah.
Because you can't do anything. Yeah. Right? It's kind of a pretty daunting thing to think about.
Yeah.
But I think part of that is because people don't understand what makes it different, right? One of the things that drives me crazy is they think that a mainframe is just like a Linux system, only really, really big. And it's fundamentally different from the cloud, because the cloud says, hey, I'm going to break up everything into a bunch of little systems, and they all work independently. And the mainframe model is the opposite. We're going to take these systems, 5 or 6 or 10 or whoever many systems, and treat them as one big honking system. Yeah. And so I have all these independent things, but they're all really working together as one. And it's that fundamental difference that makes the mainframe a much more powerful business engine than the cloud.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's the other thing I think about too, and most people just don't realize it, right? The mainframe's been around for 45, 55 years, right? The hardware gets refreshed every 2 years, and so does the operating system. And then IBM brings new things and new capabilities like Java, containers, and Python, and those types of things, right, to the mainframe. And it's really the applications that were written 45, 50 years ago at that time, which, by the way, still run, the airlines and everything that we're talking about, right? Which is, we got to give props to our forefathers and our peers, right, that wrote those. I mean, that's impressive, right? Don't get me wrong, but things have changed, right? And there needs to be more agility. And, I often think about, we need to go skill more COBOL developers, or teach people JCL and Rex and everything else. And, after talking to you at Tech Exchange, maybe I'm thinking about that wrong, right? And I think going back to this whole declunkification concept that you're talking about, and like I mentioned, Python and containers coming to the mainframe, I mean, that's kind of where you're focused now. Maybe you want to spend a few minutes talking about how you're declunkifying. I think I'm going to go with that word.
That's good. No, you did it great. That's perfect. I like it. So, imagine if you're a mainframer, imagine trying to manage your system without JCL at all.
Yeah.
And if you're a mainframer listening to this, I'll give you a second to get your heart back, because the thought of not doing things with JCL is abhorrent to a mainframer.
Yeah.
But today I can do a lot of that same work seamlessly in Python. And imagine taking somebody out of school with a set of skills they already have, and saying, hey, you can take that and start to manage these ZOS resources with that skill. You don't have to learn JCL. You don't have to learn Rex. Not that they're not something that somebody couldn't learn in a relatively short period of time. You could learn it. Mm-hmm. But a lot of new people don't want to learn a set of skills that they don't know is going to give them some value right away. So that learning JCL is not transferable off the mainframe. Yeah. So I can't. I need something else, right? So if I give you Python and say, hey, I'm going to give you a set of modules that do things that do mainframe work, you could then use those to manage mainframe resources without having to use JCL, without having to use special tools. And what I like about this is, up until now, IBM and ISVs, and we would all say, we're going to give you these tools and you're going to use them to do this. And we've been kind of heavy-handed as vendors, saying, here, we will tell you and you will follow us. And what we've done is we've democratized the system.
Yeah.
Now you can say, hey, I have this skill. I know how to do things in Python. Python is going to allow me to talk to the workload manager, or talk to the underlying infrastructure, talk to the subsystems like DB2 or Kix, and set things up. And I don't have to use that old JCL stuff. That's kind of a big deal, because now I'm giving the power to a new group of people. And I think what you'll see is a different focus from vendors like IBM and other companies, because they'll have to say, oh, you want to use this because, not because we told you to, but because here's the extra value I provide.
Yeah.
And I think that's a big, big shift, and makes it more in line with the rest of the IT world. I think that's an important change.
Yeah. And I think that's great. And so instead of going and skilling up a talent pool that isn't highly motivated, to your point, right? They want a skill that they can use for the next 20, 30 years, right? And it's hard to convince them that Rex and JCL and COBOL and assembler skills are going to use for the next 30 years, even though you can make the argument the mainframe is going to be around for a while. Python is more attractive, right? Or Java or something like that. So instead of reskilling them, you reskill the mainframe, essentially. Right?
Well, it's funny. I mentioned I literally travel around the world, and I talk to a bunch of mainframe executives and leaders, and they all say the same thing. They've been saying the same thing to me for the last 4 or 5 years. Frank, our sysprogs, they look like this, right? they're all 5 years or so from retiring.
Yeah.
And I have people coming in, and there's no way they're going to get up to speed fast enough before these people retire. What am I going to do?
Yeah.
And so that's really, for me, the thing that I've been fighting against. Okay, how do I solve that problem? What's interesting is internally, our CIO's office is trying to figure out how to declunkify their environment. And so they've taken a bunch of new hires, people who are skilled in Python but don't know anything about the platform. And we've had them for the last 8 months or so building automation, Python automation, to manage their ZOS environments. Now, these are people that when they came into the company knew nothing about the mainframe, nothing at all. And I would pass probably 80% of them off as pretty good sysprods already. Why? Because they were able to take a set of skills that they already had,
yeah,
and just kind of add this understanding of this piece. They just finished a Python code that will allow them to install and configure a DB2 subsystem, right?
Wow.
From all in Python from scratch. That kind of thing would take years to teach.
Yeah.
And here's people who picked it up in less than 8 months. I think that's pretty cool, right? And so that's the kind of thing that I see happening, that I know can work, that if we as a community embrace it, I think it will automatically catch on, because the young people are ready. It's really us as the stewards, I think, of the platform to help them along and get there.
No, I mean, that's very interesting, right? And, if I think about, what VirtualZ has done too, or just triggered what you were talking about, right? So, for those that don't know, right, we provide very simple, easy access, right, to sequential, non-sequential files in the mainframe, zip enabled, so it runs on a zip processor, but it's 90%, without sharing too much, Java, right? If not a little bit more than that. And we've got a very talented chief technology officer who's able to integrate the Java into the low-level ZOS capabilities, right, to make that happen, right? And I think opening, Pandora, for me, that was like eye-opening. Wow. I figured the whole thing was written in COBOL somehow and, assembler and everything else, right? But no, it's much simpler than that, right?
Well, and that's the thing, is that people have associated COBOL with the platform. And not that there's anything wrong with COBOL. I think, it's a great language. Anybody who says they don't know COBOL and they're speaking to me in English, I give them a hard time. It's literally English, right? There are a couple of nuances, but you create sentences. You use English words. It's not that hard. But having said that, languages like Java or Python, they're languages that people come out of school knowing.
Yeah.
Why not take advantage of that, right? So what we did for Java, we actually added hardware instructions to manage Java faster, right?
Yeah.
So the ability to take a language and make it perform well on the platform is something that we're very focused on, because we have to keep up. You can't just say, well, PL1 is a great language. You just use that language. What's the big deal?
Yeah, just learn it.
Yeah, right. I had somebody once say, why are you pushing this Python stuff? It only takes an hour to learn JCL. I'm like, well, it takes a little bit longer than an hour. And it's not always that easy to keep up with. So, it's, I like the idea of always having the modern languages on the platform.
Yeah.
I think that some of the older people might look down their noses at some of the more modern languages.
Yeah.
But if I can get people to do things and create really cool things like the stuff you guys are doing at VirtualZ, I think that's just good for the platform. And I love the idea of having the mainframe data and and information from it so accessible.
Yeah.
Do you know that most companies spend 20% of their MIPS or more just ETLing data off the platform?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's expensive, and that's crazy to me that people do that. I mean, the idea of being able to say, only pull off what you need when you need it is a great money saving idea. And it's amazing it's taken so long for it to come to somebody. Hey, we can make money this way.
Yeah. I mean, if you could instantly reduce, the cost of the mainframe, right, by 20%, right? I mean, that's what VirtualZ's objective is, right? Is to really go after that market and those challenges around ETL and change data capture and trying to keep data in sync. And now you've got data in multiple places, right? And it gets complex. It gets hard to understand, what is a system of record? You really want it to be on the mainframe because it's kind of been the system of record for so long, right? And its processing power is so impressive, right? And I get the kind of, I'll use the term old school mentality, right? Like, why not use JCL and all these other things, but that we've used for many years. But the reality is, if you could bring in a whole new generation of talent that really can unlock, new use cases and capabilities that the mainframe offers that we haven't even really been able to touch on or imagine, right? I mean, I think, the platform is really what's impressive, right? And the old school folks should be more focused on the platform as a whole and not just the languages. Although if you spent 35 years in those languages, you're going to be tied to them, right? And I fully respect that, right?
Yeah, that's what people say to me all the time, Mark. It's like, I've been doing this way for 30 plus years.
Yeah.
And it works well for me. Why should I change? Yeah. And I get that. But again, as stewards of the platform, I think it's incumbent on us to really help people really fall in love with the platform the way we have. And to do that, you have to give up some of the gems that you have, right? And what's cool about that is if I give some of these capabilities to people and let them see the value, they're going to come up with new and different ways of using it that we never even thought of because we're not in that milieu, right? So I agree with you. I think it's a long time coming. I wish it had happened 20 years ago, but hey, here we are.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think about, I first got introduced to Z Linux, right? And that whole capability probably 5 or 6 years ago, right? And that to me is very interesting, right? And as part of my role at Accenture, I also managed a partnership with Red Hat for a period of time as well, and got exposed to OpenShift and its full capabilities, right? And so that whole idea of running Red Hat OpenShift on such a powerful machine and so close to the legacy data and legacy applications, I mean, that's a great innovation that I still think, to the point we were just making, is going to unlock a lot of use cases we haven't even thought about. But for declunkification, are there any kind of up and coming initiatives you're allowed to share with us or want to share with us, right? Well, I know IBM likes to keep a lot of the innovation close to their chest sometimes, although,
there are a few pieces. I'll probably get in trouble. I don't know, but I do think, to your point, the whole OpenShift, having OpenShift managing what people used to think of as just traditional ZOS capabilities. You'll see a lot more of that kind of thing. There's a tremendous effort to simplify. All this declunkification is really about simplifying the environment and making it so that people aren't afraid of it anymore, or it doesn't feel so foreign. And so a lot of automation, things like Ansible, managing resources, along with Python. That kind of thing really brings the platform to that new group of people. AI is going to be very, very valuable, not just from a business perspective. I believe it will be, the whole, hey, I can detect fraud within the transaction and save money. All that stuff is cool from a business perspective, but I'm a dyed-in-the-wool IT guy, right? Business is cool, but it's the tech that really matters, right? So, but AI. Think about the AI opportunities for taking the complexity of this system and really bringing it to people in a new way. I think that's going to be huge. One of the problems of the mainframe is that there's no such thing as a vanilla ZOS.
Yeah.
Nobody has one, right?
Yeah.
But imagine the AI can start to understand how you've configured your ZOS and say, okay, here's alerts that are coming up, and based on the way you have it configured, here's what we should do. And of course, up front, it'll be, hey, I think we should do this. And you as the sysprog say, yes, do that. But over time, the system can actually literally heal itself along the way. And so, we've talked about these things for decades, actually, but we're really at the cusp of being able to do that. And so I now will be able to have data scientists work with traditional system programmers and admins and architects to create a world where the system really is much simpler. And the funny thing about it is, because ZOS and mainframe runs multiple boxes as one big box, it would actually be a simpler cloud platform than the cloud.
Yeah.
Right? So all we need to do is make it easier to program to, make it easier to manage, and suddenly it becomes the cool thing that we've been saying for a long time, but also accessible. And that's really what we end up with, is a really accessible system.
No, that's great. And I know, like, that whole AI ops thing has been around for a while, and honestly, a lot of the cloud providers have done a good job with that, right, in their own environments, and bringing that sort of concept to the mainframe, and being able to code the scripts, right, to self-heal in Python and modern languages as you apply the AI and everything else, AI models and everything, and then getting access to that data, right? I mean, simplified, access to the data is going to be very important to be able to build those models. And let's be honest, the processor and the compute capabilities of the mainframe lean itself to be able to run some of those complex models as fast as possible, right, on the mainframe.
Yeah, and what they've done, and so this is the cool thing about us, I think, IBM, is that we make the hardware. We've designed the operating system. We've kind of built a lot of the middleware, and so when the time came to build the Telum chip, to build the AI chip, we didn't just get a bunch of hardware guys to sit around and go, what should we do? We had the hardware guys, we had the middleware guys, we had the operating system guys, we had research. We had a bunch of people that got together and said, what would be good? And because you had all these different people working together, you build from the hardware all the way up an understanding of what AI can do. And I think that is the wave that's about to break, Mark. It's all this capability is there. It's right at the edge, and all we have to do is grab it. Yeah. And so the work that I'm trying to do is make it easier for people to grab it.
No, that's perfect. That's perfect. All right. Is there anything I missed, or anything that's I should have asked you that I didn't ask you, and being not as a mainframe expert as yourself.
No, I always cringe when somebody calls me a mainframe expert. I'm not an expert. You know, there are experts out there, but no, I think we've talked about the stuff that I would want to talk about. I'd want to put a plug in for my podcast, Terminal Talk.
Absolutely.
With Jeff Bisty. It's out there on all the regular podcast environments. Maybe I'm not an expert, but we certainly interview a lot of experts. So it'd be great for people to go check out terminaltalk.com or terminaltalk.net, I think, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm pretty psyched about being part of this community, and I can't wait to see what the next generation is going to do with it.
Perfect. And I'll give you a plug as well. I did go out and watch or listen to a few of yours, as I am new to this whole podcasting thing and wanted to learn more about yourself as well. And so I learned a lot. It was great. So I do highly recommend it for folks that want to continue their education around the mainframe. You had some great guests and everything out there as well. So